Good day, class. Today we'll be discussing Chapter 11, Logic, Understanding Reasoning. Turning your books to page 309, we'll start with deduction. Now, the basic structure of deduction is you start with the major premise. Gives an example here of all students with 3.5 average and above for 3 years are invited to become members of Kappa Gamma Pi, the Honor Society. The minor premise: George has a 3.8 average for over 3 years. Conclusion: therefore, he will be invited to join Kappa Gamma Pi. The idea being here, then, is that if a larger idea or argument you're making, you have specific evidence that ties into it, then the result of combining those two things is that if this is true, and this evidence that ties into it, therefore this must be true as well. So it shows how your evidence builds on itself, basically. Larger concept, minor point you're trying to prove, combine the two, then you prove your minor concept to be true as well. Induction is other form of logical reasoning as well. And that one basically starts off with minor evidence, adds up to a larger major point you're trying to make. Either direction is perfectly fine for organizing your evidence. You just pick whichever one works best for you and the argument you're making. So there's no one right or wrong necessarily. It's more what fits best with the particular argument at hand you're trying to create. So the example of this with von Driel's essay, it's called It's All About Him on page 312. Now, in this essay, he establishes the reason for his argument in his opening paragraph, where he explains that he cites various examples of mass shootings in recent years and serial killers in recent American history as well from the last 40 or so years. And he argues that what they have in common is that many of the ways that the public or media try and look for answers and recover these stories is looking in the wrong places. So he starts off by showing the problem with how these crimes are covered in the media or examined in general by the public. And that's the larger reason he gives for why he's making this argument. He goes on to support this with this thesis in the second paragraph, where he says that those who do these things share one common trait: they're raging narcissists. So it shows his overall major premise here. He's going to try and argue is that all these types of crimes, he's going to reference mass shootings and serial killers in the United States, have the common trait that the perpetrators behind them all have narcissism as a key personality factor that drives and shapes their motivations and eventually then the terrible actions they committed. He argues in doing this, we get a better sense of how we understand it, how a public responds to this, and how then we deal with these crimes when they happen, and prepare for and deal with trying to stop or avoid these in the future. And so it goes into why this matters, how we react to this affects on how we deal with it, and how we go forward dealing with crime from now on. He supports this in paragraph 3, where he explains that psychologists from South Africa to Chicago have begun to recognize that extreme self-centeredness is the forest in these stories, and all the other things, guns, games, lyrics, pornography, are just trees. To list the traits of narcissists is enough to prove the point: grandiosity, numbness of the needs and pain of others, emotional isolation, resentment, and envy. So he lists off these personality traits to kind of show what he means by narcissism. It's important because any definition you use in an argument, you want to make sure it's clearly defined so that you and your audience understand what you mean by that term, and you all understand this is the term I'm going to use, and this is what I reference when I talk about it throughout my text. And also it shows how he starts building the details to show why he's going to try and connect all these different cases together through this common personality trait. He goes on the bottom of the page, he describes one example of recordings taken by Stephen Michon and Hugh Ainsworth, two journalists who documented the case of and recorded various tapes of Ted Bundy's interviews while he was on death row before he was executed about 25 years ago. He points out and gives quotes from their investigation of Bundy's crimes and is in talking with him that show a lot of how Bundy's worldview demonstrates the kind of narcissistic behavior, he says, is seen in the other crimes that have happened since then as well. That Bundy saw the world as a stage, that something to be controlled and mastered. All of the people were tools to be expended or used for his choice of what he wanted, and also that he saw people as expendable, or as was surprised they were found. Because he argues the sheer number of people in the world, how could he be missed? It really shows how much he devalued human life and saw people as a means to an end for his own personal gains and desires, rather than having kind of meaningful idea that people then have their own desires, wants, and deserve to have their rights respected beyond just his own. So it kind of highlights through the wording itself and the actual quotes he uses from this journalistic investigation to really demonstrate what he's talking about narcissism. He goes on to page 313. He points out that these public crimes that are committed are then for the own desires then of those that commit them. And then also the way they're committed, very public places, like the clock tower shooting by James Hubrey in the early 60s in Texas, the Harris and Cleveland Columbine shooting in 1989 in Colorado, that both have this idea of theatrical, very public displays of violence. And they're very public, attention-seeking way these crimes are committed in highly popularized areas, in very public areas, ensuring mass media coverage and attention that'll be noticed, the types of clothing worn, how the crimes are committed. These elements all tie into a sense of intense need for attention and gratification in a very public and violent way. And he ties this through time by those two different examples he gives, one from the 60s and one from the 90s, to show this is not a new pattern, one that's been established for years. And I was trying to show how these pieces tie together. He goes on then to talk about a more current example, the Virginia Tech shooting, committed by Cho on his students at Virginia Tech at the time, and how details that came out about the case during and afterwards about his behavior, and his journaling, his records of his videos he made or his own writings, how isolated he was. And it points out that some of his own actions from people that were in classes with him or around him show he intentionally would ignore people, be isolated. And so while his writings argue and complain about being lonely, other testimony or evidence that Vondriel points out shows Cho's own actions made him lonely. He complained about being alone, yet he did things to ensure he stayed isolated from other people. He didn't make efforts to then relate to people, and so then it's no surprise he was lonely. He created his own problems by his isolation, self-centeredness, and then eventually part of his belief in his own superiority. So it shows how his actions added to his own mental and increasing instability, which then eventually culminated in his crimes. Then he goes into referencing his counter-argument, all about on page 313, paragraph 9, where it says, in Holocaust studies, there is a school of thought that says to explain is to forgive. I won't go that far, but we must stop explaining killers on their terms. Minus clear context of narcissism, the biographical details of these men can begin to look like a plausible chain of cause and effect, especially to other narcissists, and they don't need any more encouragement. So what it means here is that if we try and give some kind of simplistic explanation for a crime, it can be seen or distorted by other narcissists as justifiable, and that can then add more to people seeing these crimes as justified or ones to be emulated. And that's one that he argues is dangerous. One reason why he argues is part of the problem how these crimes have not been accurately covered in the media or in public understanding. That they have to be seen that these crimes are done by people who act out of the most selfish of desires, and that they are to blame for their actions. There's no simple explanation or outside force necessarily, but there's more complicated things at work here, dealing with their own kind of distorted personality and worldview. And that's a key part of why they are to blame for their actions, and not just some scapegoat, like he argues, like violent video games or media. Rather, that the heart of it is more the personality of the person and the behavior and psychological makeup. Then he goes on from there in paragraph 10. He says part of the problem is that narcissists don't see themselves as having a problem. It deals with their own kind of self-centeredness, and that we have to recognize this kind of personality trait as dangerous and harmful and not see it as justifiable or as one that can be accepted. That's one reason why he argues this is a problem that has to be addressed. And while we identify this behavior as harmful and as the source, then it deals more with what really is behind this and not just some simple write-off reason that would diminish the truth behind why this happens. That's the kind of larger argument Vondriel is trying to make. Now, that say, it could be stronger if he added more examples, and if he argues there's such a wide range of pattern here, he should be able to get plenty of examples, more than he does. So one of the problems is it's too short, and I think he should have included more psychologists or criminal profilers who could vouch for the kind of assessment he's making. And then from there, the big part of his problem is that I think that it's not clear if he's just trying to tell us this so we understand these crimes better, or more towards prevention in terms of how people deal with narcissistic behavior around them, how they identify it, they call it out, and just in general how to stop this kind of atmosphere of narcissism that these crimes are a part of, the most extreme forms. And that's when I think you could clarify, what do we do with this information? And it's important to remember that for any argument you make when you discuss a problem or a solution is to go through why. Why are you doing this? And also, what do you want the audience to do specifically? Do you want to change how they think about the topic, how they act on it, how they speak about it? What exactly is it you want them to do? It's important because it helps them understand what kind of goals you're setting up, and does your essay meet those goals? If you want them to act a certain way about the topic, do you give a clear reason why they should, that they can believe? They have to decide themselves that they believe you or not, based on the goals you've set, the evidence you've used to try and meet that kind of goal for yourself and for them. So one thing that's unclear in Mondrill's essay is he sets up this topic, but doesn't quite show where he's going with it, aside from just how the media should cover it better, but how is it tied how the public talks about it? And that's one thing I think he could go more fully into in his essay that he doesn't. All right. Next, we're going to look at examples of common fallacies. Now, fallacies are basically flaws in logic. They're evidence or strings of argument or strategy that inherently are flawed in their structure. They might sound good on the surface, but when you start to examine them and evaluate them, you really find it makes a hollow argument that, once taken apart, falls apart and is false, unconvincing, oftentimes harmful or dangerous, and covers up or ignores valid evidence that would make a better argument. And that's why it's important to understand fallacies, to know how to avoid them in your own writing, and how to identify them in the sources that you use to weed out which ones you can trust and which ones not to. It's especially important for things like fake news or politically slanted media or news reports or social media posts. Be able to understand fallacies, you can spot flaws in arguments, and then quickly disregard or tune out ones that are inherently manipulative and trying to control or gain unfairly your trust and agreements. So especially now of all times, it matters more to understand how to identify fallacies and how to know how to react to them to avoid being taken advantage of by somebody. All right, I'm not going to go through the whole list because there's a lot of them here, and gives examples of them all on your own. And one thing you can try and do talking to your classmates is think about examples of your own fallacies and why they're fallacies. The more you can come up with them, the more you understand how they work and why they're flawed, the more you can know how to spot them on your own when you edit essays, your papers, and other people's as well. We'll go through some of the main ones in the text to better understand what fallacies are. One example is generalization on page 316. Now, generalization, all it is takes a handful of examples or one example and tries to argue that proves true all other groups in that category. And this at the heart is the basis for things like racism and bigotry in general of any kind, or prejudice, is based on massive simplistic generalizations. And so it's one reason why this type of fallacy is one of the worst ones, because of what it can lead to, the kind of violent behavior and hateful actions that can grow and be born of generalizations. Now, one reason why generalizations are fundamentally flawed is any argument, you can't take one or a handful of examples and use it to justify an entire argument based on if there's not enough proof. Like, I'll give you an example. One reason why stereotypes of men and women's behavior can't be proven true is because the thing about there's billions of people on the planet. There's no logical way to assess all people of one gender or another behave or act any one certain way on anything. Because you can't prove it, you can't argue it. And that's one reason why generalizations are fundamentally flawed, is they're steeped in an idea of a false certainty that all one group of people behave, think, or act in one way or another. And because you can't prove that, either now or for all time, you can't argue it. It's not possible to prove it logically. It doesn't hold up. You can find counterexamples to almost any generalization you see or stereotype. And that's why ultimately it causes people to be lazy in their thought and not really address the complicated pictures of evidence that are out there. And so that's one reason why I strongly advise, especially for all kinds of fallacies to be weary of, are stereotypes or generalizations. Now, let's see. Other examples to look at are ad hominem on page 319. This is a focus on a person instead of an issue. And this, unfortunately, is one you see a lot in politics. For example, if you watch a debate of any kind, if one candidate insults the personal character or other traits of the person's appearance, dress, things that are unrelated to the policies, the job they're competing for, anything actually relevant to the argument, that's an example of ad hominem. It's basically a form of verbal bullying, essentially, where you're making fun of someone else and trying to connect them because of X reason, superficial. That must then translate or somehow explain why they can't do this deeper argument, task, or responsibility that you're arguing over. And this is why it's fundamentally flawed. One thing does not affect the other. Just for example, that if you're going to say one person wears dark colored clothes, does not automatically mean they have no sense of how to dress, or that they. One example is that if someone has, let's say, is short, they automatically then are unable to do a job. Well, what does height have to do with profession? That'd be an example of one where physical characteristics, things that are unconnected to their ability to do something and aren't true evidence of character or capacity to succeed in a particular field. And that's one reason why it's very important to identify ad hominem fallacies when you see them, because unfortunately they're terribly common in politics, in public life, on social media. You find examples of these everywhere. And that's the reason why they have to be combated, because it distracts people from the genuine evidence and real, true, valid evidence or reasons why someone will be valid for a candidacy for an office, for a job, responsibility, to be trusted for anything. It distracts from the real evidence, which is a lot harder to prove, but is worth much more. And that's what really matters more than any kind of surface level criticism that a person can try and use to justify why they're better at something than somebody else. All right. Other examples are slippery slopes on page 320. Now, slippery slope is also common, unfortunately, seen in politics and public life as well, where it argues tries to boil down a complex argument to two forms. And it argues that one form is basically if you choose one option, then it'll be much better. If you choose another option, this can lead to a whole sequence of terrible consequences. It's done a lot when people argue about, let's say, if a law should pass or not. If law X passes, it will then lead to mass anarchy, chaos, and the end of the world. That's an extreme slippery slope scenario where they try to make a connection between one action will lead to a chain reaction of other events that will have huge, cataclysmic, far-reaching consequences. Now, the problem here is that it's very hard to connect all these different things together. And it becomes a stretch the more you try and connect them to really see, well, logistically and logically, how could that really be true? How could one event cause all these other things? Now, it doesn't mean that some events can't be connected. I mean, cause and effect arguments can definitely be valid as long as you can actually show realistic and logical connections between them. And the farther reaching the effects sound without proof to back them up, the more likely the person is just using a slippery slope to scare people into voting a certain way or acting a certain way. That's the reason why slippery slope is also a very dangerous political manipulative tool or argument tool as well that should be argued against and struck down by hard, clear evidence to really demand clear proof of connections and not just suggestions of them. Let's see. Other arguments to look at are red herring arguments. And these ones also then are dangerous because it distracts people. It tries to show a false problem or a detail that's unrelated and tries to draw attention or scrutiny to that one thing that's not really the main topic. This can be done then to distract people from dealing with or exposing key information or dealing with real serious matters which are much more important. And it's important to identify when a red herring is being used as a decoy to lure people away from what really matters, to know what the really main part of the argument is, and avoid getting distracted by anything else. Let's see. Another key element to look at is appeals to tradition on page 325. And appeals to tradition basically is where someone tries to justify their actions because of some kind of entrenched history, whether it's on religion, culture, or some other kind of basis. Problem here is that they try and solely argue that, well, something's right because it's how we've always done it. Problem with this is that it ignores progress, ignores the possibility of change for something better, ignores opposing views of thought. It's very close-minded. That's one reason why tradition-based arguments are very dangerous, because there's a lot of examples of historical behavior which were terrible that were traditions. Slavery was considered a tradition. Burning witches was a tradition. And those examples of terrible crimes in American and world history that were done for many years that really highlight how tradition should not be used as basis to justify actions. Those are extreme examples, but you get the idea that tradition should not be the sole basis to do anything or to pressure compliance and ignore new ideas for change for the better. All right. All right, that concludes chapter 11. All right, I will have the next video posted soon after this. Hope you have a good day. If you have any questions, please email me using the inbox tool on the left side of your screen. And if you want to talk about any of these ideas more with your classmates, please, of course, contact them by email as well. And have a good day.